Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today with Kirk Williams, the owner of ZATO PPC Marketing. And Kirk has like a huge long list of what he does and what he's accomplished. I'm going to go through a couple of them. Obviously, he's the owner and lead strategist of ZATO PPC Marketing. It's a micro agency dedicated to running Google Ads for small and large businesses, and obviously staying on top of paid search best practices. He's been named one of the 25 most influential PPCers in the world by PPC Hero from 2016 to 2021, which is so cool. He's the author of two amazing books that I own both of, Ponderings of a PPC Professional and Stop the Scale. He's also been a conference speaker at many conferences, from Brighton SEO to SMX. Actually, that's the first place that I met Kirk, was at State of Search in Dallas, Texas. And I think that might have been one of his first presentations. So kind of knew Kirk before he was the man. And then he also has his own podcast called PPC Ponderings, which is really great. The editing is amazing, and the content even better. So Kirk, how are you?
Good. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's funny. I had kind of forgotten about the State of Search days, years ago. Those were really good times. Yeah. I love that conference.
I know, it was such an amazing conference. And for those people, it's a search conference in Dallas, Texas, very regional. And the cool part about it was, although it's small, but like it really brought in big speakers, but it also gave people the opportunity to like come in and show their stuff.
Yeah, there have been a few regional conferences like that I've been at, like Minnesota Search and SLC. I think it's Utah DMC, I think they call it. And similar to the one in Dallas, their State of Search, it's a very similar vibe, exactly what you described. It's kind of like they bring in a lot of well-known speakers who travel, but also there's kind of that local vibe thing going on as well. So it's kind of a small atmosphere, but you have some big name speakers. It's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those who have never been to like an event or a conference like that, especially if you're in the digital marketing world, like it's so valuable. I can't tell you like how much you learn, as much as you can go on and follow blog posts and YouTube, but like there's something special about a conference. Not every presentation is going to be amazing, but you really get some great nuggets, and it can change your whole year till the next time you go.
And I would just add, like, I think exactly what you said, it's not necessarily, sometimes at those conferences, you really do have presentations that are just that's stuff that's not presented somewhere else. It's really, really good. I have always thought that the benefit is exactly, that networking aspect where you go and you can sit there, and then it's like talking about it in between the sessions. It's like going to lunch and chatting with other people who are actually in PPC accounts and just asking them some of those questions that maybe you don't feel like voicing online, right, for the world to see on Twitter or Reddit, and just kind of pondering that stuff together. There's just incredible value with those. So yeah,
that's such a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. It's always about, right? It's like it's like in design, the white space, right? It's the time where it's off, and that's where you can actually bring out the beauty of everything else. So today, we're going to be talking about mentorship in a PPC marketing micro agency, and also the different facets of your life. And then also we're going to get into Kirk's specialty of shopping and Google Ads in general. All right. So we're going to start off. Let's get a little bit into your background, Kirk. So can you tell us a little bit about where you went to school and what you studied?
Sure. Yeah. I have deep school history in the marketing and business space, in that I have never taken a business or marketing class. I actually have theology degrees, so ironically, I was just talking to someone about this, where in the PPC community, you'll meet people like, this person has a philosophy degree, this person has a theology degree, this person has a literature degree, whatever it might be. And it's just a cool thing about digital marketing and PPC is that it just brings all these people together. I'm starting to meet more people with marketing degrees, but overall, I just think that, it's been attractive to anyone who has done a little bit of work. And there's something about the creative plus stats analytics side for certain people, that's just a draw. And that's what it was for me. Kind of stumbled into it actually when I was pursuing my master's in theology. And I just needed a job to basically like help me pay the bills, right? So sure, anything that comes along, a marketing opportunity came along. And then eventually in that company, I got into the PPC realm. And for whatever reason, it just clicked. I just really loved that aspect, that there were kind of both aspects. There was kind of a psychology trying to figure out people and figure out how you present benefits in that. But also it's still like PPC has historically been very like data driven, stats driven, analysis driven, right? It's not just like you're really thinking through this video and thinking through an anchor video and creating it. And it's kind of hardcore audience and that. It's also kind of, at least, especially when I started, it was even very like, sometimes there was like mind numbing copy paste work involved too. Like you'd go through the keyword list, you just build out this expansive keyword list and then like set your manual CPCs and adjust things manually. And for whatever reason, I just love doing that. So
it's amazing that like kind of you stumbled into it. But when you look back at like your seminary theological like background, I'm sure as with anything we do in our life, like it adds to who we are and what we do. What do you think like from that experience makes you a better marketer or a PPC marketer today?
I think a couple of aspects. I do think there's some level of like a big part of theology is kind of diving into like the study of people and God, if you will, right? And yeah, even with differing opinions on that, you are kind of spending time like learning about people and how we act, how we think, that sort of thing. So it's funny because I don't know if I'd place hey, this is exactly what I learned that I tie. But I do think that, when you just spend years kind of thinking through like, what drives people? How do people make decisions? Like, how do they think? What kind of helps a person? Because that's a big part of, theology, right? Really in any religion is like people are trying to change who they are at some level. There might be some level that someone is like unhappy with who they are and they want to change it, right? And ironically, a huge part of marketing is that. I think there are ways you can be unhealthy about that. I think there are ways that you can be healthy about that. Like, hey, here's an opportunity to improve this area of your life, and then kind of figuring out how to present that and benefit. So I actually think that had probably some impact. More of a directly tied impact for me was I just had to read a ton of stuff. Like I had to take a ton of books, read them, figure out like maybe the argument they were making, distill that, respond to that argument, and then like distill that into a paper. And then I had to do a ton of writing. So I had to do a ton of reading, a ton of writing, all at the same time, especially it could be on different topics. And I actually think that kind of helped directly train me to be able to consume a bit of different content, especially just in the PPC world, and be able to kind of process it, distill it into different points, whatever, think through the aspects of it logically, and then like maybe respond to that. And so that's actually where I actually got going, is just writing I feel more comfortable with writing than I do speaking. I just feel like I'm able to better process my arguments and my thoughts, or even just process out loud, right? And so I just found that kind of clicked with me and probably helped prepare me a little bit for specifically the PPC world, and specifically about like growing ZATO's brand and getting awareness with that.
And I couldn't agree with you more, because I think we've talked about this in the past, you and I, but I went to rabbinical seminary. So we have a similar background in that case. And I credit a lot of, the way I think and the way I've been, successful in digital marketing is through the processes that I learned to think through things and to analyze and to communicate. So I think it's a great point is sometimes it's not about the subject matter, but it's just the skills and everything that you use in order to get that. Those are very transferable. So, I often find, there's always the debate, and I'd love to hear your opinion on, when you're hiring someone, do they need a college education or not? But the pro of like, why would you want to have someone with a bachelor's? But going through that system and kind of training their mind and answering things, right? That adds a certain pedigree, that maybe you wouldn't get if you didn't go through some like formal higher education? I'd love to know what you think about that.
Yeah, it's funny because there are such strong opinions on all around, right? Like,
Yes,
as with
totally.
anything at this point in life, pick a topic and you'll find strong opinions at this point. So, we don't do a ton of hiring. We're a small agency. I've just not had to do a ton of hiring, to be honest. And so like, it's one of those things where I try to communicate, like, I have opinions, and then also like, I have not done, I'm not the person who's hired like 4,000 people. And so I have all this data around it, right?
That's fair.
Although for someone listening, I will shout out a book that a few different people referred to me as. You're trying to figure out how to learn. What I've found is like, really find people who are experts in whatever they do. And there's almost a level of it almost doesn't matter if it's just interesting to you. I started following a guy on Twitter who's like an expert at like strip mall real estate, like the little malls, is like the outside malls. I have no intention of ever purchasing real estate in a strip mall, but like, just the way that he processes and has some interesting just business ideas was super interesting. But also what I've found is that individuals they have their own people they follow and resources that eventually probably will connect with you, right? And so as I've found good people that are trustworthy in terms of just their knowledge in business, I've asked them. They have done a lot of hiring. I've asked them like, hey, what are your go-to resources? And the book Who, by Randy Street, I think Jeff Smart, I believe. I think there's a couple of people wrote it, but the book Who, it's literally called Who, was referred to me by multiple people. So I read it, and I don't know, for what it's worth, I really, liked it. So I'll throw that out as a hiring idea, resource. But like, to answer your question specifically, I've just found that overall, I decreasingly have a strong opinion on whether someone should have a bachelor's or not. And I am more kind of looking for, okay, here's this specific role I'm trying to fill. Like, do they have the curiosity and the passion as they're pursuing that? Do they have, the ability to learn? Do they have, in some ways, like, some level of education is needed? We're marketers. So like, if someone is not able to put a grammatical sentence together, and yet they're supposed to be writing like forward facing customer ads, that's not that we're like, putting them down for not having the education. That's like, that actually is a core thing that we need. Our clients trust us in order to have an ad that doesn't have spelling mistakes, right? So I think there's some level of that. So in some ways, I think I'd say I would look at individual people as they come and just whether that's a fit. But on the flip side, I absolutely agree with the fact that someone who has been able to commit to a program, absolutely they've learned from it, especially someone who really is a curious person. They've dug in. There are things that they've learned, soft skills. There are those things that they've learned in order to commit, to be able to follow instructions, to write, to be able to do this stuff. I do think is valuable. And so I think there's a value there. And then you do have to do a cost analysis though as well, in my opinion, as far as, okay, well, then what are you going to invest for that degree program, and what can it get you, and all that. And then that goes into loans and all that stuff as well. But I certainly think that there is a lot of value as someone who's, done a couple different higher education courses that don't have to do with my career. I'm happy about that, to be honest. Like, I guess regret it. So
yeah, I think, like you said, it's complex, but I think if you can get a little bit of both, right? Find people with passion, but also find ways to see how people can, work in structure and have good soft skills. Like that's like the ideal, right? The marriage of both.
Mm-hmm,
cool. So let's now get into why we're here today, about mentorship and marketing. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, how would you define a mentor?
I think at a base level, I would define a mentor as anyone who like has the willingness and the knowledge to offer help to someone in an ongoing manner. And I don't really think I'd limit it much more than that. Like, I think that age doesn't have a strong pull there, although sometimes you tend to see someone who's older with a mentor. But again, to me, it's more of like the willingness. So I think that's there. Like if you're kind of annoyed to be a mentor, you're probably not a good mentor. Like if you're going to be annoyed with someone asking questions, but like if I think of people who have mentored me, it's just someone who just is actually happy to help me and answer my questions, but they also have the knowledge so that I can, or they have the knowledge to point me in the right direction, even if they don't know an answer. So
yeah, I think that's great. And that brings up a really important point about finding someone who is patient and willing. Because sometimes you find the people who know everything, but like when you speak to them, like you just want to run away because they just have no time. So that is such an important trait. You've mentioned that your father-in-law has been a significant mentor for you. I'd love to learn more about that because obviously that goes outside of, let's say, direct business. Did you intentionally go after and say, hey, can I get your help? Or did it kind of develop naturally with your relationship with him?
Yeah, no, yeah, good question. And to be fair, I think I'd say both like, I love my parents. I think my father and mother have also been mentors in my life. As I think kind of specifically business, I think that's where I think more of my father-in-law. So we actually, years ago, when we actually started the business and moved from Louisville, Kentucky up here to Billings, Montana, part of that move was actually because like we needed the money to get out on our own and take the risk. So we actually moved in with my in-laws. And what kind of happened is we just kind of had this suddenly organic mentorship where we would just be sitting around the dinner table and, chatting type of a deal. And I think it was just one of those like, well, how'd the day go? Right. And we talk about it and maybe he'd talk through some, well, hey, so he's an insurance agent. So, hey, here's some things. And here I had this interesting situation happen with a sale that happened, blah, blah. And he'd kind of talk through it. And then, I would be able to say, well, hey, this occurred. Do you have any advice? Right. And so I almost kind of had this endless day-to-day someone who has just been down the road and who I have since learned is an incredible salesperson and just not really this outspoken, like not typically who someone would think is a really good salesperson, like a very type A, absolutely able, like always has the answer, right? Even if it's the answer or not, always has the answer, kind of like, I think of like the strong personality used car salesman type deal. And I think that's what I'd had in my mind as a salesperson, which is why I always thought, man, I don't like sales because that's not who I am. I just try to be a very honest guy, and that doesn't work if you're that sort of salesperson. And like what I learned was that he just had this way of using just kind of this honesty and this commitment to actually learning about them, to actually really identify what their actual needs were, and then just talk about how his solution could help them. And it was almost one of those clicking moments for me as we would grow. And so, a lot of the sales that I've learned was, directly because of him and just a lot of other wisdom. My mother-in-law is actually like a brilliant, just in terms of finances and things like that, numbers and that. So she would help us process, think through some of that stuff. And so I think it was just ongoing access to someone who was really invested in us and really wanted to see us succeed. That was such a big deal for us in terms of like what happened specifically for me in that instance. So
yeah, and it like brings up such a cool point that let's say you didn't move in with them, you may not have had those conversations and those moments. And so the fact that you like put yourself into that situation, I know you like didn't put yourself in a situation to get a mentor, but you surrounded yourself by people who you could learn from. It gave you access to that opportunity. Sometimes, we're looking for a mentor, we want a mentor, and it's hard to find that. But sometimes just by getting closer to people, hanging around people, sometimes that relationship can come up very naturally instead of it like, okay, I need a mentor. Like, who should I choose?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. And that, that gets into some different complexities as well, which is, I just think there's a fine line between just being willing to immerse yourself and be with someone. And also there's some level of consent needed from that mentor. So, if someone is really skilled at business and you're like, man, I'd really love to learn from that person, there just might be some level of, I don't know. I guess I'd say don't like sidle up to them and try to get them to spill their secrets in almost like a manipulative sort of way. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like I've experienced that, to be honest. And it really comes off as like rude, and you kind of feel used. And so I actually think it's a little important even in how you communicate that as a mentee seeking mentorship. And then this is one of those, like, this is a no-brainer thing, but I have seen this so much and it really needs to be called out on a mentoring podcast. And that is, if you are going to someone to be mentored, I don't care if you absolutely hate what they have to say and think they're an idiot. Like, your job, in my opinion, this is my opinion. Like, if you see yourself as wanting to learn from something, like, your job is to shut up and listen and ask questions. And if you don't agree with them, that's totally okay. Then like, thank them profusely for their time, and then don't ask them, don't contact them again. Right. But like, I am surprised how many times I've had people who basically like reach out and they're like, hey, really respect you, like your books, whatever. Just, even for just a quick question. Hey, I just had a question on here. And like, I don't need to answer that. I can ignore that LinkedIn message, but I do want to help people. Like, I've been helped. I want to help people. I'll spend time to get in and like share my thoughts, and they'll start like either arguing with me. And I don't mean in a questioning way. I don't mean in a, okay, are you saying this? Cause I'm trying to make sure I understand, cause what I've seen is this. And so I just want to make sure. I don't mean in like a respectful kind of pondering way. I mean in just kind of like this, all of a sudden, like, well, you're wrong. I one time had someone say basically like, that wasn't helpful to me. And I was like, sounds good. And ironically, like, that person reached out to me again in the future. And I just ignored their message in that instance, because like, he'd already communicated to me that like he didn't value my help, which is totally like, that's fair. That's his opinion. But like, I have other stuff to do, and like, I'm not going to waste either of our time then. Right. And so in some ways, like, if you're seeking help from a mentor, like, be humble enough to be willing to listen and learn. Because even if you think they're wrong, they actually might be right. You might be wrong. Or if you don't think they're a good mentor, like, to me, the polite thing is just to like thank them for the time they invested, because they didn't need to invest that time, even if they're wrong, and then go find someone that you think is a better fit for you. So I don't know, just be polite and kind in some ways might be the summary of that.
I mean, that's honestly shocking, because like, Kirk, I put you on like the list of like Uber digital marketers. So like, even when I reach out and have a question, like, oh, like, I know he's so busy, but to think that people like will actually come out there, like, ask for your time, but then blast you, it doesn't even make sense to me. It's crazy.
In this specific example, it was something that I didn't have a great answer. And so it was one of those where what I did was communicated that honestly. Hey, I don't have a lot of experience with that, but here are a couple of things that you could pursue. And that was where the response was kind of like, well, that wasn't very helpful. It's kind of like, okay. I was kind of shocked, to be honest. I was like, all right, but like, that's not the only person I've had something similar to that happen. And I really have had people argue. I've had people, here's another one. Not someone who is even coming from like a negative standpoint, someone who really is excited. They really want to meet and learn from you. And sometimes like they kind of get in the way of themselves. So like, if you're someone who's listening and you reach out to someone and you say, hey, could I ask you a few questions about blah, blah, blah. And they're like, you know what? Sure. We'll go ahead and do that. Then they, as the person you've asked, who, purportedly has the knowledge that you're trying to gain, they should be talking the vast majority of that call. And I've had so many situations where I'm talking to someone who has asked me to hop on the call and help guide them on things, where I talk, 7 minutes of a 30-minute conversation. And I'm like, okay, I mean, that's in some ways like whether or not they valued my information is fine. But also like, if that's kind of what they wanted, if they seem to be hoping to get some advice out of that, but they were just excited, or maybe sharing like, here's everything and blah, 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 what to know. And they just kind of talk too much. So I guess that'd be the other thing is, maybe like if you have the chance to really connect with someone that you would like to learn from, I would actually prepare a lot beforehand. I would actually really have some good questions that you've pondered, thought through, maybe even think through like how you're going to ask them to be succinct, but to communicate well. Because that time, like if you're talking to someone who's just really a brilliant person in the e-commerce D2C space and they have thoughts on contribution margin or whatever. I was just listening to a podcast with Andrew Ferris and Bill DeSandro, I think, about that. So that's on my brain. But like let's say that somehow you get Bill on the phone and he's willing just to help you out. You're a person who's just starting out. Man, don't ponder what you're going to say live on that call, because you might never get that call again. And that might be the most valuable call of your life. Prepare for that call is kind of what I'd say. And yeah, now I'm rambling, but I thought of that as well. That's kind of happened as well. So
no, I think that's wonderful. I know myself, I struggle with listening. And I think a lot of people do, and right. It's like, we have to work on it. So I think that's the first point. Second point is like, you brought back memories of like when I was doing my MBA and I was at these networking events and like going up to like companies and people. Like on one hand, you want to hear them, but on the other hand, you want to impress them, right?
Yes, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking like Danny Gavin, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and I can see like where I was there, and now it's like, man, I would approach that totally different. So I honestly think it's something that comes with maturity and time and age. But that's why it's important to have conversations like this, because some people don't even realize that they're doing the wrong thing.
That's so interesting what you say. You're exactly right. And I think that's part of it. And here's, and this might be what you said, you've learned from it. Here's exactly what I've learned from that, which is if you are the person talking about all that, trying to impress, because again, ironically, the odds are in this relationship, and this is okay. This is not a put down thing. This is just kind of the way the world works, right? If we're getting started in something and we're talking to a person, we're talking to a lady who is running a multi-million-dollar company. She started from the ground up. Again, like the odds are that she has more information from us. So first of all, we're not going to impress her with our knowledge. In fact, we're more likely to, my brain went to, I think it's a proverb actually in the Old Testament. That's something like, even a fool is considered wise until they open their mouths. I think that, look that up, but I'm pretty sure that's a proverb in the Bible. And like, sometimes I keep that in mind, that like the more that you talk to that person, you might be trying to impress them. You might actually be revealing how much like you don't understand about certain things, and the way that you can really, really actually impress them. Like if you actually want to make a mark on them, do exactly what I said before, which is think about it and then ask really good questions and then listen, because I guarantee you the vast majority of other people in your position that they meet are doing the first thing. They're just talking. They're trying to show off. And like, they will remember the person who asked really insightful questions. Cause like we all are like that. So like if someone asks an insightful question, I actually feel like I'm more impressed with that person than if they're just starting to blah, 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 talk about all that they know. And eventually your brain actually shuts off, right? If someone who has a really good question and then stops to listen, man, that person is someone actually who I think I listen to. So
yes, I think that advice is so valuable. Let's talk about you being a mentor. You speak at conferences, you've written books, you have podcasts. Obviously, there's a component to it where you're doing it, to help your brand and your business. But I'm sure, there is a part of you want to be out there to help and to teach people. So what led you to do this, and what do you love about being like really a mentor for so many when it comes to PPC?
Yeah. It's fun you say that, because for sure, just like everything in life, there's mixed motivations, right? Like you put out a course, you spend time and energy to put out a course on, like I put one out on Udemy of smart shopping, and then Google killed smart shopping, and like all of the above, right? Yes, I want to help people learn. I also want to like have the ZATO name be more out there and blah, 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 right? You don't put a course on Udemy, by the way, to actually make money unless for some reason it goes like super viral, and that's very rare. So it's more like the long-term type type benefit. So I think that that's always been part of it for me is like, I just kind of know, like, as I try to put good content out there, it does help people. And then there's even something, I don't even know how to describe it. There's something in me sometimes where I'm just like, I don't even care if no one reads this. Like, I gotta write about my concern about PMAX right now or something like that. Right. Yeah. So some of that might be even just that personal drive thing there that is almost this, like, I gotta write this or I'll die, you know?
I noticed that from your writing style. Often when I'm reading your book, I can see that it is sort of like a self, reflection, working out the concepts. So sometimes it's not necessarily about, okay, how can I give the point over to someone else? But it's like, I need to figure this out, right? And then let me take this and share this with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think to my wife's chagrin, sometimes, like, that's even how I talk. Like, I process out loud. And sometimes, like, okay, thank you. Also, you just took 40 minutes to process out loud, you know? Sorry, honey, you're right.
So being in a micro agency, and for those who don't know what a micro agency, it means it's a lot smaller. We're not necessarily looking to grow and get 100 people. I imagine that there is a lot of mentoring that's going on, especially because, there's only so much that you, Kirk, can do. And obviously there's other people who are in the agency and you need to transfer the knowledge to them. And so I would just love to learn more about, specifically in the micro agency kind of world, how do you mentor? How do you transfer knowledge?
I'm still trying to figure that out well. So if my team ever listens, they'll probably laugh at that question. I don't actually think I'm very good at doing that in our small organization. And I'm trying to get better at that. And what I mean by that is, like, we're trying to figure out, okay, is there a better process for even us, like, training one another? So one of the things we're going to try starting soon, and I mean, this is an idea stolen from a lot of people who do this, is just like, we have a small team. So, hey, everyone, we have our weekly team meetings. Like, everyone is going to take a topic and going to really dive deep. And then they're just going to do a little presentation and teach us all. And we can kind of ask questions. And so then hopefully by the time we're done with that, like, Google just changed XYZ up about whatever it might be, responsive search ads. Okay. What are some, would someone do some deep dives on articles that Brad Geddes has written, and then maybe Fred, and they've gathered data. And then what are some really important RSA best practices, things like that. And so I think that's part of what I'm trying to insert into our process. I do try it organically as we go. Some of that is just like, as we're chatting, if someone has a question, my objective is not just simply to say, yes, that is correct. That's how, that's what you should do in Google Merchant Center. Like, my objective is to be like, okay, so here's how Google Merchant Center, handles that. So when we have the feed, go blah, 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 blah. We literally just had this happen where I helped talk someone through because she was like, oh, should we use a supplemental feed for that? I was like, well, no, I think we should actually do that right within Merchant Center in the main feed. And here's why. And, we kind of talked through that. I tried to give the reasons. So, that probably, so it's kind of happening organically a little bit here within our agency, and then trying to build that in with process as well. But also, I honestly don't know if I'm super great at that within my own org. So we're all learning and changing and growing. So
finding the best way to spread the knowledge around, right? It's not always easy.
Yeah.
And we have to try. I love that idea of having like that presentation. That's something that we do as well. And it's so valuable. Cool. And even when, let's say, I imagine when it comes to a micro agency, pretty much everyone's related. So in larger agencies, you might have someone who works, let's say, in the SEO department, and they're listening to like a Facebook presentation. But I feel like even in those sort of scenarios, like, there's so much you can gain from those sort of presentations. So let's now move into marketing. I feel like this is so timely, so I kind of want to just jump straight into it. Let's talk a little bit about Performance Max. I just got off a call. I teach at U of H, and we had a project with a real life company. They're a small e-commerce store that sells girls' dresses and clothing. And, they run on Shopify. And, she had that automatic setup to run Google Shopping campaigns, comes along and says, hey, no more shopping campaigns. You got to run Performance Max. She had a horrible Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And she said, like, thank God I have a husband who, we primarily rely on his income, because honestly, if it would have just been my income, I would have had a big problem. So that's crazy. Like, so what's going on with Performance Max? I'd love to know, what do you think?
So I literally just had an extended conversation on Twitter about Performance Max today, where I kind of I've not talked about Performance Max a lot online, and I think this is why. So the timing of this is kind of humorous because I think I have a better idea of what I think about Performance Max, and that is that I just don't know. I think there is so much we don't know about Performance Max that it's very difficult to formulate hard opinions. And my concern is how much I'm seeing Google and in some ways other advertisers pushing hard opinions about Performance Max, especially when it's in kind of the positive way, because there are certain aspects of it that I feel like I have unanswered questions to that are pretty big. So a few of those would be, okay. First of all, what we've seen is that overall, if you have, and this makes sense, but if you have a lot of data, so you have a lot of conversion data, you have a lot of spend, you have a lot of ability for Google to just go nuts and really find stuff, at least even within directly tracked stuff, Performance Max really does seem to do well. It can just be very hit or miss and tends to be more on the miss side for smaller accounts. But again, that's oftentimes who Google suggests should try Performance Max, right? And so you just have oddities there, especially the disconnect between who they say should use it. And I don't know, maybe that started to shift within Google. But as far as I know, that, they've always been big proponents of, hey, this is for anyone in some way. So go ahead and try this. You're just starting out. Sweet. Build a Performance Max campaign. So you have that aspect. You have the aspect of, we are very early in a significantly account consuming campaign type. We are very early in identifying what that does to a bigger business reality. So what I mean by that is, if someone primarily uses Performance Max, let's just give it the benefit of the doubt, even if it is sending directly tracked sales and you're hitting your ROAS, you're hitting your efficiency targets. What is that doing if you're going to run that for the next 3 years of your business life, 5 years of your business life? What are they doing? Who are they actually running after in their targeting for their audiences, especially? Are they primarily, and this is what a lot of people have kind of investigated and talked about, is that, are they primarily, especially if you have a ROAS target on there, are they primarily pushing at your bottom funnel? Because if that's the case, then how is that a sustainable long-term solution if you're just never really going after, you're just never generating demand, you're never really, going after top of funnel stuff? So at the very least, and this is part of what we do when we do utilize Performance Max, is we still utilize it in a fairly comprehensive account wide. We have YouTube stuff running, especially for top of funnel. We're still very much targeting specific things with search. We're still running standard shopping campaigns on the side as well. And we're utilizing Performance Max. So I just think that there are some questions around that sort of mindset that still has me just going, with Performance Max. And we're testing it. We have found it to be, in terms of, I keep saying directly tracked efficiency and revenue for a very specific reason, because based on what Google's tracking and what Google says as far as what you're receiving, then it can often do very well, especially if it has enough data and enough revenue. But again, kind of that bigger picture of how it's working within all of your marketing channels, I actually think still is not fully answered, at least from what I've seen. So I'm concerned when people are just very much all in on PMax, even at the extent of primarily using PMax because of those questions. So that was a very long rambling reply. But again, like I said, it's kind of in my brain as of this morning even. So,
but that nugget of where you've put in a ROAS target and kind of Performance Max, where is it targeting? Most probably lower funnel, not top of funnel. I don't know. I think that's a genius insight, because it's Performance Max is meant to be taking everything together, right? How can I make YouTube more efficient? How can I make all these things? But if in the end of the day, it's you have the option to show on YouTube, but really it's targeting the bottom of the funnel. And then what was the point in the first place? So I don't know, that makes me really curious.
Well, and some of that could be, and again, this is just where I keep talking about time because I think that is important. And that's part of what's been difficult with Google lately is stuff changes so quickly. It's hard to see. So like smart shopping, did smart shopping as a campaign type overall work in terms of big picture with blah, blah, blah? I don't know. It only ran like 2 years, like that is not a long enough time to really identify, in my opinion, just the validity for businesses of a marketing channel. And so anyway, so PMAX, there's just still some stuff where I just think, okay, there are options to pursue harder after like new customer acquisition in terms of conversion goal settings. You can mess with different audience signals to Google, although even then they're only suggestions. So Google still will run after whatever they want, but you can set an audience signal with your Performance Max campaign. It's a suggestion. Okay. So again, like I'm just curious to know over time, like, are there marketers out there who really have done a lot of like really digging into driving demand gen and new customers, and they have visible success and they have all of that, and they just really are not ensuring that it's brand. And I am, just to be very clear, because there might be someone watching who's like, cool, we've solved that. We have, blah, blah, blah. That it's kind of like the hack. We apply the brand keyword as a negative. It's like, that's not just what I'm talking about. I mean, okay, so you're not just going after brand. We're talking like bottom funnel visitors. We're talking like people through marketing and others who are more primed. And you just can't, as a business, only ever focus on those people. Is it part of your overall strategy where you just have really awesome demand gen other channels going on? And in some ways now you're just treating PMAX as like your bottom funnel strategy. Okay, that's actually fair. But those are the sort of questions I've just not really heard people talking about with PMAX. It's either someone's like, I hate PMAX, or someone's like, I love PMAX. And I just think it's more complicated than that. And at least we need to start asking these questions and pondering this together before, Google forces everything to PMAX all the time and we have no option, for anything else. So,
I mean, not to bring up conspiracy theories, but do you feel like things like PMAX like are just here to like cover up? Like it's like, oh, we're not getting enough retargeting spend, so let's find a way to get people to do more retargeting. I don't know.
I don't think it's too much of a stretch at all, because Google has been, found out, if you will, like sued. There's settlements in that for a variety of bad faith gestures that they've done. And I'm forgetting some of the names of those. There's one that I'm pretty sure it has the word Jedi in it, actually, ironically. I want to say it's like Blue Jedi or something. I can't remember. Mike Ryan, we've talked about this and he's brought it up. Like I think Project Bernanke is something like, so all that to say that, I'm not explicitly stating that they are doing something wrong. I'm just saying like there is evidence that they are not unwilling to mess with, ad targeting and that in a way that helps their bottom line. Right. So if you have, let's just say, a campaign type like Performance Max, where you can target any placement within Google Ads. So any placement within any auction that the system wants to target, and there's no external visibility on that at all. So, like your question, right? And you know this, so I'm saying this more for your audience, but like your question, it's very fair. And guess what? Neither of us can determine whether or not Google's doing that because it's completely hidden within the system. And so like, is it that much of a stretch where if they have some placements that are lower value, but they have some spend to attribute, and as long as they're hitting your ROAS targets to slough off traffic and spend into those poor performing placements that otherwise someone explicitly targeting them would never choose? I don't think it's much of a stretch or conspiracy theory at all. And that sort of campaign type like offers the perfect environment to do that in. So
bottom line is time will tell, and we need to be patient.
Time will tell.
And hopefully they'll let it run a little bit longer so we can actually figure it out. And it won't be the next, smart shopping. So near the end of our conversation, we know, or I don't know if we know, but we'll let people know that Kirk loves Star Wars. So we'd love to end off with what are your top three? And it could be movies, it could be TV shows. When it comes to Star Wars, what are your top three?
I think I'll always be old school in that there was something about being a kid and watching Empire Strikes Back that was just this like mind blowing, like the story, the shifts inside of what happened in Empire Strikes Back just rest with me at an emotional level, and I'll always love it. I think it's just always going to be number one because of like what I remember experiencing as a kid. So Empire Strikes Back for me is top, and then I'll put Rogue One second. I loved Rogue One. Third is just I don't know, a blend of like everything else. So yeah, I don't know if Mandalorian or Andor would kind of beat each other out, because I like both for different reasons. I love how Andor was kind of completely different than other Star Wars stuff. I just love that. But Mandalorian to me was just this awesome, like fully Star Wars feel. I don't know. I love the cartoons. I love Rebels and Clone Wars. And so anyways, so how about that? All of the Star Wars universe that's not Rogue One and Empire Strikes Back would be in number 3 place for me.
And all of the wonderful opportunities in the future, right?
Yeah, exactly. Keep it coming. I don't care.
Going.
I will watch it. I will continue watching.
Yeah, it took like 20, 30 years for them to actually get started, but now they're started, keep going.
Yep. Now it's a money machine, so why wouldn't they? So yeah.
Exactly.
What about you?
Oh, I'm a traditionalist. The first 3 films are deep in my heart. I remember going when they were remastered. I don't know if you went to the theater when they were remastered for the first time, and so I remember going.
No.
And yeah, I think it was like in the late 90s, and that was like a big deal. Like it was cool. So for me, that's special. I still haven't gotten into the shows. Everyone's telling me to, so I will. But it's going to take some time.
You haven't watched them or haven't gotten into them emotionally?
No. I haven't watched them yet.
Yeah, I don't know which one I'd say to start with. I would say I liked, again, like I say, I'm kind of a person who I just enjoy it all. Like people will be like, I completely hated episode 9 or whatever. I'm like, I just enjoy it all. I enjoy it if it's Star Wars. I always loved Solo and the Star Wars story. And I think there was kind of a time, kind of like prequels, there was a time where people kind of hated them, hated Solo. I've always kind of liked all of them. The only one I'll say is Boba Fett to me as the show, the series, is probably like my least favorite of the series, which is too bad because Boba Fett has actually always been my favorite character. So I was like, I don't know. It just got a little, sometimes like the speeder bike gang, you'll know what I mean when you get there. It's kind of like, okay, there's a random like teen speeder bike gang. I don't know, whatever.
I actually have to send you a picture. An employee of mine gave me a gift. It's this giantly framed picture of Boba Fett, but it's made of little Darth Vaders and stormtroopers. Like those little pictures to make a big picture. I'm gonna have to send it to you. Like it was so random. It's like, well, that's cool. So yeah, I'll send a picture to you. So
love it.
What's next, Kirk? Is it another book? Is it like what's your next big thing?
So I'm trying to build my YouTube channel. So that might be my current focus, Merchant Center Mastery. Hopefully Google doesn't like totally change Google Merchant Center. If you do, you'll hear this loud wavering cry that you'll be like, what is that? It's coming from up north in Montana because Kirk is wailing. But that's currently what I'm trying to do. I'm just basically trying to like go deep into here, just almost like random specific things you can do with Merchant Center to try to just help people know Merchant Center better. So that's a big thing. And then our PPC Ponderings podcast, we're taking a little break from it. It just took a ridiculous amount of production stuff that I did, and then a guy in my team did, which was fun. And it was really fun to do, but it took a lot of time for each episode. And we were kind of like, okay, we're kind of tired. But our next season is going to be, and we might keep this up. We'll see. We're going to try it for a season, see how it goes. But it's going to be focused on PPC Ponderings with Perfect Strangers. And it's going to be like shorter interviews with like random PPCers that like we and nobody know, almost as a way of just like helping give access to people who don't usually, aren't going to be the ones on the speaking circuit, stuff like that. But each of them has just a super cool tactical, here's a really helpful tip. And then also we get to know a little bit more about them as people as well. So that's going to be our second season coming up here in 2023 for our podcast. So probably those two things right now are on the roadmap.
I am so excited for that. And I love how you give back in that way, the same way that you were founded. You're giving people different opportunities to do that as well. That's why you are a first-class guy. Where can listeners learn more about you and your business?
Let's see. I'm PPC Kirk pretty much everywhere on social, every channel. Although I will warn you, my TikTok channel has, well, whatever it's called. I don't even know. I'm old. All right. It's started to shift from being PPC focused. And like, I discovered that no one cares about my PPC videos on there, but they want to see my Lego Star Wars. So I've just started doing little things with Lego Star Wars. But everywhere else, if you want PPC knowledge, is PPC Kirk. And then, ZATO So for our business. So.
Wonderful. Kirk, thank you so much for being a guest on the Digital Marketing Mentor. It's really been a pleasure. And obviously, thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Digital Marketing Mentor. We'll speak with you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. Be sure to check us out online at thedmmentor.com and at the DM Mentor on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more Marketing Mentor magic. See you next time.